Whenever the FBI hears a piece of gossip or information such as, I saw so-and-so out with another woman, not his wife, we're supposed to write everything down in memos. All your secrets are safe with us.
How long have you been in the FBI?
30 years.
That's a lot of information.
I give you the guardian of the American dream.
Mark Phelps. Fidelity, integrity, bravery. Ladies and gentlemen, the G-Man's G-Man.
What is it?
You better get down here.
5 men were caught early this morning in the Washington headquarters of the Democratic National Committee.
Here's what we know. The men who broke into the Watergate are not the end of this thing, but the beginning.
No more interviews with White House people without permission.
What?
We put the investigation to bed in 2 days.
The director of the FBI ordered the FBI to stop its own investigation.
The nation tonight is in the midst of what may be the most critical constitutional crisis in its history.
The White House has no authority over the FBI.
We can...
At all.
All this truth, it must be terrifying to you.
No one can stop the driving force of an FBI investigation. Not even the FBI.
What you're doing will bring down the whole house of cards.
Washington Post.
This comes from classified FBI files. The White House has it, and now you have it.
FBI agents have established Watergate incident as political sabotage.
There's a spy in the FBI.
The White House is gonna sanitize the entire town.
How high? How high does this go?
What about the president?
Is the president lying?
They're all lying.
There's a nickname for you at the paper. Deep Throat.
Guys, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Good to have you back, Brian. Peter, I am curious. Well, I want to talk specifically about the details of the movie and what went into it. But I want to know, just right now, when did you start writing it? When did you start shooting it?
I started writing it almost immediately after Feld confessed to being Deep Throat in
2005, yeah.
2005, 2006. You know, this article came out in Vanity Fair that was the answer to the greatest political mystery of all time. And no one knew who Felt was. I had no idea. I didn't even know the name. So we started writing it then. And then we started shooting about 1.5 years ago. So it was about a 10-year gestation period.
And you had pretty much, I mean, the film premiered at Toronto, right?
Correct.
So you had finished cutting it prior to the election, or
after?
Oh,
that's your question. Yeah,
that's where I'm going.
That's
here.
really
That's
where you're going. I was editing. We wrapped in July, so just before the convention. And I remember a conversation with Liam in his trailer. He's looking at me, and I'm looking at him. He's like, it couldn't never really happen. And then it did, and then I was editing through the election, and but it didn't affect the story. Look, this story is the story, and it's kind of a timeless story about corruption and integrity. And look, that dynamic exists all the time, everywhere. We're just seeing a bizarre coming around the planet again, another revolution.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that you were necessarily trying to tell a story that has echoes of right now, but through James Comey, through White House leakers, through particularly what's happening with how this White House kind of manages scandal and its own power. We are seeing a lot of echoes that you can almost, when you're watching this movie, you can be like, oh, that's this and that's this right now as well.
Well, what the movie does is it's really an FBI story, right. And it really shows how the FBI as an entity, as a piece of mechanization, as a machine, investigates and takes down, and then in the case of this, was stopped. And then what happens when the Bureau is stopped to do its job, you know, it rebels and bites the hand that feeds it to some degree, which is the White House. So that part I love, and that part was fascinating to me. I mean, Felt was running the FBI for many years, and during Hoover's last years, and, you know, knew everything, and knew how everything worked and how everything came apart.
He was a dangerous guy, as they say about him a number of times in the film, right?
Yeah, I mean, he knew too much. They couldn't get rid of him. You know, short of murdering him. I mean, Nixon said that you know, the only thing worse than firing you, I mean, the only worse thing than keeping you was firing you, because he knew everything, and then they were terrified that if they fired him, he could just bring it all come tumbling down. But he did anyway.
Yeah, and then at the same time, one of the things that you show at the top of the film, which I really appreciate, and I think less brave filmmakers wouldn't have showed it. They would have wanted Mark Felt to just be a hero in the context of Watergate alone and show that maybe he was just doing it out of patriotic duty. But you show at the top of the film that he was passed up for a promotion by the Nixon administration. And that was really the catalyst for him to start rethinking his place in the Nixon administration, the FBI's place in it.
Yeah, I mean, I would hesitate to call it an act of vengeance. When Hoover died, Felt, who'd been the number 2 and had been there for 30 plus years, was clearly the right man for the job. He knew how the Bureau worked. The Bureau was a very incestuous organization. Outsiders were not welcome. And when Nixon imposed on the Bureau kind of a political flack, an inexperienced political flack, he was pissed. He'd earned the job, but he was more upset that the Bureau itself as an entity, its integrity would be diminished, because he understood that Nixon was using this opportunity to kind of turn the FBI into his own personal KGB machine. And that was really it. I mean, he was, I think, wounded as a man, but I think more importantly, he was a true believer in what the FBI stood for better or for worse. And to me, that was the main thrust of his impulse.
Brian, you play a man working in the FBI under Felt. I'm wondering, did you talk to any guys in the FBI, sort of try to figure out what working inside that bureau is like? As Peter said, it's a very incestuous organization.
Yeah, Robert Kunkel was the field office head of the field office in D.C., and so by virtue of the geographic location of the Watergate break-in, he was tasked with doing his job in his backyard, as it were, and working in concert with, of course, the brass that were across the street. For basically, I don't know if literally, but they're it's all in D.C. So yeah, my research was trying to figure out what the day-to-day task of an FBI agent is, and reading about that. And Peter was a great source of that, because he would always talk about these guys as being boots on the ground. These are the captains in the war who are out there ordering their men around and reporting to the higher ups about how the war is going. And so that was something that I took particular paid attention to in terms of wanting to represent all of the men and. Well, mostly men. Probably there were women involved, but at that time there was probably just a plethora of men working at the FBI.
White men.
Yeah. And but there were a lot of people doing their job to unravel this mystery. So I wanted to try to understand that and do my part in that way. Another interesting thing about the Bureau that I learned is that these guys would bounce around quite a bit geographically. Like I know Kunkel served in Hawaii as the head there, field office there, and many other places as well. So by the time this happens, you've got very seasoned FBI agents who have spent a lot of time doing their job and jumping when the brass say, you got to go here, and they go, because of their fidelity to the institution.
I have to ask, what is your bracelet?
Oh,
sorry.
Oh,
a bracelet.
This is not a guerrilla marketing tactic.
I'm making it one.
Yeah. No, this is a band I'm wearing for my cousin and my father. I'm running the Chicago Marathon to support the cancer support community, and this is Go Tom. My dad's name was Tom, and my cousin's name is Tom, and so this is represents Team Tom.
Well, that's all right. Give him a round of applause, everybody.
And go see Mark Felt, the man who took down the White House.
And then watch the Chicago Marathon.
It's the strangest marketing campaign ever.
I'm curious. There's a lot of, I think, when we look back at governmental organizations such as the FBI and the CIA, and even the Pentagon, we have there's a reverence for duty and honor and patriotism, but then there's also a lot of conflicted emotions about these sort of different tasks that they had at different times in our history. At the moment, they may have felt like they were doing the right thing, but when we look back, we're not so sure. How did you feel about depicting a man who had sort of did the patriotic right thing, but was also a part of the FBI for 30 years prior to that, which means he was also potentially a part of some other operations that were shady at best?
Yeah, I mean, well, there are a couple parts to that question. I'm a big believer in the police. And I know, having spent a lot of time with them as a journalist in a previous life, the 98% of the stuff they do, which is amazing, we don't get to hear about because they're just doing their jobs. The 2% of the times when things go awry, that's what we hear about, but that to me doesn't represent the totality of who they are. 99% of these guys are wonderful men, you know, now women, and they go home and they're just doing the best they can. And look, Felt was part of Hoover designed the FBI in two places. There was Felt, who was kind of the man of the light, and then there was a guy who Felt did not like, named Bill Sullivan, who ran the other part of the FBI. That's the FBI you're talking about.
It was a surveillance FBI, right?
That's the FBI that bugged Martin Luther King, that would really mess with people's lives. And Sullivan was he's played in the movie by Tom Sizemore brilliantly. He was the bag man. He was like the underhanded, you know, dirty dog. Felt got rid of Sullivan and tried to clean house. And, you know, in this movie and the other movies that I make, I really try not to judge. I don't want the film to judge these people. I want the audience to take them in their totality and come to their own conclusions. I never present Felt as a saint, because he's not. But cops can't be a saint. They can't be saints because they're out there protecting us and sometimes doing our dirty work for us, so we don't have to get dirty. But in terms of his integrity and in terms of his sacrifice and what he gave up, the man is, I mean, he's really like a guardian angel. I mean, he lost traction in his family, he lost his job, he had a missing daughter. There's a lot going on in his life that he let go of to do the right thing.
I love the story of his missing daughter, who I think, like so many children of authority at that time, needed to escape it and find solace in what was essentially the opposite of authority. Was that part of his life happening at the same time as the story, or was that one of those things that, like, you know, in telling a biopic, you have to kind of truncate some
No,
stuff?
you know, look, the truth, and you know, the movie has a lot of this in it, and there's yet even more because, and ultimately couldn't pack it all in because it's almost too much to believe. While Felt was dealing with the corrupt White House and taking down, you know, the most powerful man on the planet, he had a combustible alcoholic wife who was really like Lady Macbeth and really driving him and really twisting the knife, really giving him a hard time. He had a daughter who had been gone for 3 years, the love of his life. He loved this girl. And he was afraid that she'd actually join the Weather Underground, which in those days was the equivalent of ISIS. So he, as an FBI man, was hunting the Weather Underground. He, as a man, was hunting for his daughter, trying to keep his wife together. Watergate happens. They're destroying the FBI from the inside out. Munich massacre happens. All this within the same month. So the fact that he was under that much pressure from every aspect, and each one of these things could destroy a man. So the fact that he was juggling 3, 4, 5 of these balls to me and kept it together and then became this creature completely anonymously. So single-handedly and anonymously undermining the White House while also dealing with all this other stuff and then walking away into the sunset without credit, without credit due. I think it's just a remarkable task.
What made you cast Tom Sizemore as Bill Cunningham? Was it Bill?
Bill Sullivan.
Bill Sullivan, excuse me. Great casting.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's almost typecasting, yeah. So Tom, I grew up as a young filmmaker watching Michael Mann, you know, we all did. And Sizemore just vibrates with menace. Like, he could just be talking about the menu at a diner, and you just feel like he's going to leap out at you and rip your head off and laugh at you.
Jack Scagnetti from Natural Born Killers, man.
So Bill Sullivan was that creature. You know, Bill Sullivan reached this fantastic end to his life. It's just, you know, again, couldn't make it up. About a year after this movie ends, Bill Sullivan is out hunting alone and somehow ends up with a shotgun wound to his face.
That sounds like some Dick Cheney shit.
Listed as a suicide, exactly, yeah. So that's who Bill Sullivan was, right? So you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Tom Sizemore? Right there.
Also living and dying by that sword. Liam Neeson as Mark Felt, fantastic performance. Now, I go into the green room and I ask these guys before this, like, does Liam Neeson even really act? I think he just exudes charisma and it feels very effortless and easy. And these two guys immediately are like, absolutely not. He's an incredible actor. He's super prepared. So talk about working with Liam Neeson.
Well, it doesn't. Those two things can coexist equally. He does exude charisma just by virtue of his being. But from my point of view, just watching him, as a fan, someone who goes to movies and just loves watching Liam Neeson, and I've seen him do many things on stage, on film. He's got such a strength about him, a core in him that is undeniable, and you sense that when you watch his work and you see him inhabit a character. So, for me, watching him and getting the chance to be literally acting with him in a scene in a movie was kind of extraordinary, because with these racehorses who are so in tune with what they know they can do, they can calibrate to such a degree that they know what they're doing is going to have a great impact on a movie screen, which is something that I'm learning, it's fascinating to watch, because it's happening, but they have it so finely tuned that it's sometimes you're not even aware that it's happening. Peter does, of course, because he's directing and he knows exactly what's going to happen. But for me, it's fascinating to watch. He's an incredible actor.
Peter, talk about casting him. How did you get him in the movie?
Mark Felt was a spy, right? So he was still and he was quiet.
A G-man's G-man, as they say in the film a couple times,
G-man's
right?
G-man. And he would just scan, and he wouldn't make big moves. He would always be manipulating and puppeteering. And Liam has that kind of graceful dignity to him. He doesn't move much, but when he does move, it's very, very powerful. And to me, they were synonymous, Liam and Mark Felt. He was the only actor I went to. And it was, I think, a really organic conversation. I think he understood what it was that we were trying to do, and we agreed over lunch at the Four Seasons that he would do it. And it was kind of an effortless, beautiful journey. Yeah.
As a director, do you feel a bit like a scanning puppet master at times? Well, that's a director's skill. Were you trying to scan me?
The puppet master. Yeah.
Took me a second.
I mean, look, a director on a film set is like a general in a war, right? So you're in charge of not just the people you see on screen, but the 400 people behind you that make movies happen, and everything runs through you, and you have to keep track of everything. Since I'm also the writer of the movies I make, I am thinking about the language and the words and the music of what's happening. But I have to say, the films that I've made have incredible casts. Even small roles. We have Kate Walsh in this movie for a minute. Kate Walsh is an Emmy Award-winning extraordinary actress. And I cast people like that, and I cast people like Brian because I want to be surprised, and I don't know what you're going to give me. And I want to be surprised by that, but also I don't want to have to worry about it. And it's always fascinating. So I think 80% of a director's job is in the casting. And when you've done that, then you kind of sit back and you sort of manipulate or just tweak as you go.
Let's get some questions from the audience right here.
Hi. So obviously this is a true story, and it's a pretty well-known story. So I was wondering, as a director and also as an actor, what kind of techniques that you use to make the story fresh and palatable for a current audience?
That's a great question. Fresh and palatable for a current audience. The best stories are universal stories. And, to me, this is the greatest of the David versus Goliath mythologies. And that mythology is enduring for a reason, because it's one of our most defining ideas, concepts. And to me, when I prepare to make a movie based on real people, I ask Brian and others, do a little bit of research and then throw it all away. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to impersonate someone who's dead. You don't want to impersonate someone who's eccentric. You have to find a performance within you that's organic and real. So it feels like now. It feels like life. It doesn't feel like a piece of history or a documentary.
Yeah, amen to that. I think that the key is exactly what Peter was saying, is that people aren't going to be interested in things that are replications of things. People are going to be interested in watching the human condition play out before them in a very true and visceral and realistic way. And I think that's what, I hope that's what we've done with this.
Next question.
Hi, I was wondering how your views of the U.S. government has changed since doing this film.
Obviously, we're in a time where the ground is shaky, to say the least. I think anytime you have a chance to, I love my job because by virtue of my job, I'm asked to explore things and look at, in a detailed way, pieces of history or pieces of the human condition that will lead me to, different perspectives. And in this case, I think what it did is just cement my own view of where we are now and how history repeats itself and how absolute power corrupts absolutely, and all those things that we know to be true. So, if anything, it has changed me in the sense of tightening the screw in the board that for me that says we have to hold on tight and we have to speak truth to power.
Weirdly, it's given me more faith in government. The system works. The institutions work. The corrupt presidency of Richard Nixon was brought down. We're in a time when we're looking at a presidency that has a new kind of corruptions. But the systems built around it, the parties, the Congress, the FBI, they're built as a series of checks and balances, and it's working. We have a special prosecutor now. We had a special prosecutor then. We had the FBI then. We have it now. And I actually have enormous faith. We're in a rough ride. I'm not even sure we can even